Welcome to class. I'm Dr. Brian Sather, and out here on a little bit of a foggy, crisp fall morning. Doing a little trail run slash hike. Get little intervals in, but I want to talk about today's topic is basically sport ethics and moral values, primary moral values to be specific, in the context of sport ethics. So I'm going to go over some things that are largely based on the work of Lumpkin, Stoll, and Beller, Sharon Stoll in particular, but I really like the work that they've done to kind of outline some of the primary values in sport ethics. But it's not something that is well, exposure there on a cliff. It's not something that is just their opinion. These are general agreed upon principles by sport ethics experts. But basically, if you look at all the values in societies around the world, you can boil it down to 4 categories. Most rules and canonized books, and I mean, you just kind of look worldwide, you can arrive at some themes. And those themes, there's 4 moral values. Justice is one, honesty, beneficence, and responsibility, those 4. So we can take most principles and lump them into those categories. So that's compared with, there are other values that are more specific to different societies, and those would be secondary values or social values, and we can lump a lot of things. So look at that, we can see into the valley. So those social values would not be moral values, so we got a difference between those 2 things. But the moral values would be things that operate under, yeah, look at that view, a little crisp. I think it's like 33 degrees out here. So the moral values, those 4 things, those would be important for basically, if you want to do good, morality has to do with doing good and doing bad. So that's our context for when we deal with morals. So if you're a good person, you would act morally, and those 4 values, you can lump everything into those. Those are largely, I mean, the paradigm we're talking about is a Kantian ethics paradigm. So Kantian ethics believes in universal principle that exists. So a lot of ethics experts and people do believe that there are universal truths, universal principles, but there is another school of thought that has to do more with relative ethics, but we'll save that for another day. So the moral Kantian ethics approach says there are universal principles. These should apply to all people, all places, all times. And we can lump those into those 4 categories. Again, beneficence, which is doing good for people, or not doing harm, if you want to look at it that way. There's justice, which has to do with fairness. There's responsibility, and lose my train of thought. Try not to trip here on the trail. Kind of free riding it here. Oops. And honesty is the 4th. All right, had to get back on track. So honesty, not lying, things along those lines. So those principles should apply in the sport context too, if they are in fact universal. But those are the values, the categories. The principles would be something, we could have several principles in each one of those categories. Like beneficence, we could have perhaps a universal principle that you should not harm someone. So that would be a universal principle within that beneficence category. We could have other principles, but we'll deal with that later. If you read through the class content, we'll run into many examples that we can deal with. But for starters, let's try to arrive at least at what some universal principles are within those 4 categories, and that will kind of set a pretty good basis for future discussion. So remember those 4. Those are important. Those 4 categories are moral values, and that's not to be confused with social values, which could be things like hard work could be a social value. Maybe some cultures value that, some don't. Why really do we need to work that hard? What's universal about that? Maybe you could argue it's a responsibility thing, but timeliness, like when you should arrive. Some cultures, like if you're Swiss especially, you better start the meeting and end the meeting exactly on time. That's why they're so good at making watches. Some cultures, it's like, 10 minutes late, at least I'm here for the meeting. Why does it really matter? Why is your time more important than my time? So anyway, maybe you get the point. There's certain social values that exist that probably we wouldn't lump into the categories of universal moral values. You don't have to do with morality. You're not an immoral person if you show up late to your wedding, for example. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know. It's a value. Some cultures are going to value it. I'm sure your future spouse is going to say that's an irresponsible thing and immoral if you show up to your wedding late. So in a nutshell, that's what we got for moral values to set the tone for future discussions. All right, that was a nice little trot. Class is out for today. We'll see you again with another topic.